Yeah, all right. You can let it rip. And it's on.
Internationally known, the most electrifying name in media today, the dribble. Oh, these carrots are divine. You get a dozen for a dime. It's mad. Ready, Nick? Let's get 'em.
Yeah. Damn. That shit sounded electrifying, man. Nick, you killing this shit, my nigga. I'm gonna have to bring you on the show, let the people hear from you. There be niggas in the comments saying, "You ready, Nick?" That's my little signature joint right now. So, yeah, shout out to you and shit. Good afternoon, everybody. You tuning in to the most electrifying name in media today, the dribble. I got a great show for you guys today. This is inspired by a picture that someone sent me yesterday. Um, of myself when I was about 15 years old. I went to prep school, and after school, I would rush to the hood to meet up with my homies who went to public school, my guys and shit, And as I've told you before, and for anybody you read my book and shit, when I came up in that, that crack era and shit. So, after school and shit, we would run to the block. But anyway, it's one of those pictures, one of those real vintage pictures. We standing there on the corner of 22nd and German, east side of Erie, in front of this store called Cheney's that we all used to congregate in front of. That was our store and shit. Anyway, we in front of this fucking payphone, and this is real vintage picture. People was making comments about the payphone and shit. It's a story that lied under the payphone. We had that payphone wide open, straight up. That was our phone. That phone, we had that motherfuckers calling that phone from jail, calling to the payphone from jail. Motherfuckers calling, girls would call that phone, Jamil out there, T Small out there and shit. Like, people was calling to that phone, copping, you know what I mean, doing their thing and shit. We had that phone turned up so much. It was an apartment upstairs from Cheney's. A lady, an older woman lived up there. I think she probably owned the building and shit. We had that phone ringing all night, all hours of the day and night. She came out there one day with a butcher knife, man, and cut the jack off of it in front of everybody, man. Just start whacking on that motherfucker. She was an older woman. We wasn't gonna say nothing to her and shit. But yeah, she disabled the phone. But anyway, this picture was real vintage and retro. Put me in the mind of if you follow me on Instagram, you can go check the picture out. It's at I am Gully TV _. The picture puts you in the mind of New Jersey Drive, Sunset Park, and Juice. You know what I'm saying? That 90s fashion, the Timbs and shit, and the sweatsuits, and the Columbia shit, and, these different various types of leathers that you've seen in these different rap videos over the years, man. We had all types of leathers that, you don't see anymore, because these leathers, you had to be in the underworld to get a hold of these joints. Like that joint CL Smooth had on, and the When They Reminisce video. Those leathers didn't really have a name. You wouldn't open them up and they wouldn't have a tag or anything. Those leathers were made by in the hood, tailors and shit like that. You know what I mean? A real era that ain't really like active like that no more. But anyway, um in this picture, oh man, I was killing them. I had on the Timberland goose down vest with the Timberland sweatsuit. This is in the fall of 1993. I know and I was killing them. Like I said, I remember when I bought the vest and everything. I bought the vest on Center Ave in Center Ave in Pittsburgh and shit. A lot of these clothes that I'm about to talk about, that's where you had to go to get them. You had to be on the Ave, or around the way, the barber shops and shit. People coming through with bags of clothes and shit, selling clothes out of their car, the trunk of their car and shit like that. I'm from that era, and I started to think about it and shit. I'm like, damn, I remember that sweatsuit and that bubble goose and shit. I liked it, that joint. I was fresh in that joint. It was the shit. And now that I'm an adult, I'm looking at the picture, and it's blatant knockoff. I'm looking at the picture. I know that Timberland had nothing to do with making this fly ass sweatsuit. It had a big embroidered um, Timberland logo on the front, the tree, and it was fitted real. It fit real nice, drawstrings. I'm talking about this sweatsuit was essentially the Carl Kanai sweatsuit that was popping at the time with the Timberland logo on the motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? Had the big stripes on the you know what I mean, on the sleeves and shit. Real good material, but the chances of Timberland manufacturing this shit was slim or none in retrospect. I didn't, now that I think about it, I don't think Timberland even started like making apparel and outright sweatsuits and you know what I mean, shit like that until later. They probably got an idea of what was going on in the hoods and shit. But anyway, Timberland was something that I obviously wore a knockoff of. Now follow me. If you watch the movie Juice, GQ got this bucket hat on, and in the movie and shit, they had those bucket hats and they were Timberland joints. This was back then. These bucket hats, you had to get these joints in the hoods and boutiques and shit. You know what I mean? Around the way, or out the trunk of a motherfucker car. These wasn't you wasn't gonna go in Coing Sporting Goods or Models or anything like that and find these hats. You had to be in the hood to get these joints. Same thing with that famous Timberland butter leather the niggas had in the early 90s that had the big tree on the back, the butter leather with the hood and the drawstrings. Highly unlikely that Timberland had anything to do with them butter leathers and shit. Them garments, again, was something that was only sold in the streets and in the hood and shit. And at this time, you know, I was in my teens, my, you know, experience and with my first experiences with getting fast money and shit. So I'm in the hood after school and on the block all day and shit. Like the whole summer, I'm on the block. That's what we worked at and shit. And you would develop reputations with two people that was constantly coming through the block. That was the niggas with the clothes and the picture man and shit. You see a lot of pictures, like when you go to these old gangster pictures, Mechacopolis, Tell 'em Blanco sent you, Hassan Farrock. When you go to these joints and you see those old pictures, there were people, that was some guys' hustles to be in the hood, taking pictures of different hustlers, taking pictures of hustlers by their cars, taking pictures of hustlers coming out the barbershop, taking all of those pictures that you see. That was it was a good chance that was somebody hustle. In every hood, there was, you know, in the streets, there was a picture man present. Like you can go to Harlem, ask the hustlers on the 140th and Lenox, ask the hustlers on 45th and Broadway, who was y'all picture man? They're gonna tell you, oh, such and such, and them used to be taking the pictures and shit. You know, the picture hustle with the frames and shit, the Polaroid joint, that was a whole business, an industry in the hood. So every day you would encounter, they would come through the block, the picture men and the fucking niggas with the clothes. Now, the niggas with the clothes, we buying clothes out the trunks of cars and shit. If you was a hustler, that's where you shopped at. You shopped on the block basically and shit. Like we went to stores for sneakers and shit. You dig what I'm saying? When the new sneaks came out, we went to the fucking sneaker stores and the malls and shit like that. But clothes, we was buying that shit in the hood. Like the story of Carl Kanai is documented. They was selling hats with drawstrings on them. A lot of them was like in Naughty by Nature videos and shit like that. Those wasn't in stores. You had to be in the hood to get this shit. And this was the type of shit that was being sold out of niggas' trunks and shit like that. So I'm of that generation that was buying a lot of clothes in the hood, out of the streets and shit. You know what I mean? Niggas roll up, I got this. You know what I mean? You're not really asking them where they got it from or nothing like that. We knew who the boosters was. Don't get it fucked up. We knew who the thieves was. But, you know what I mean? Like, we not tripping off that. We tripping off whether or not this shit is flavorful or if it look good and shit like that. And we buying it. No questions asked. We weren't introduced to Shabazz Brothers and Mecca and Helly Hansen and Maurice Malone and shit like that. We weren't introduced to that shit in stores. That shit was being sold in the hood and shit. Before them niggas got on, before those guys blew up and got actual contracts and started appearing in magazines and shit like that, They was selling their shit in the hood. When my OG homie Ronnie Hammond, when he would come back from the Magic Show. This is a guy who was always hustling clothes in my neighborhood. He would go to the Magic Show in Vegas, where all of the new, garments, where all of the new clothing designers were. And he would come back to the hood with the latest fly shit. That's why I knew what fucking Maurice Malone and Helly Hansen and all that shit. All of that shit that them niggas was wearing on New York Undercover, all that fly shit. You go back and watch episodes of New York Undercover. They was wearing the shit on New York Undercover, these leathers that I'm talking about, the Timbs, the sweat, was on New York Undercover and shit. That shit was all an industry that was going on in the hood. So I'm not really understanding that as I'm buying clothes out of the trunks of niggas' cars, a lot of it was blatant knockoff, and it wasn't even actually an issue. Niggas would roll up and they got Nike short sets and shit. Y'all know the niggas. Y'all know them. They used to come up. They got they got Nike sweatsuits. They got the Tommy Hill one. They might have a Polo one. All of the. We was buying that shit out the trunks of their cars. They was giving us plays and shit. You can get it right on the block. You get one for yourself, get one for your little shorty and shit like that. And that's what it was and shit. It wasn't like no big thing like we're wearing. It wasn't no stigma as if we were actually wearing knockoff clothing. I don't even think it was a term yet. Dapper Dan, who made his living selling his own Fendi, Polo, Louis Vuitton, Gucci jackets up there in Harlem until he got raided. That was a knockoff factory and shit. So maybe it was ingenuity and black people being gifted and not having the money to buy actual Louis Vuitton shirt out of a store or buy actual Gucci, jacket out of a store. We started to create things and shit. So the whole knockoff game in its entirety, I believe, probably started based on desperation to, to be well dressed and have the nice things, and creativity, from the youth and shit. And that's how you have, I imagine, the original knockoff game. I remember being a shorty and riding British Knights on a pair of Chuck Taylors or some shit like that, on a pair of, or drawing a Fila sign on a sweatshirt with a marker or some shit like that. When we was doing, or if drawing a Nike sign on a hat or something like that, when we was doing shit like that, we was basically creating our own knockoff, our own replica. You dig what I'm saying? My earliest experiences with replicas was one of the first things. I make shit too. I'm a curator and shit. I'm very, very in tune with this topic because at a point in time, and I still to this day make my own shit. But I remember in maybe like 87 or 88, these hats came out in the hood with the rhinestones on them. The teams, New York, they would have like a New York Yankee sign. The Yankee sign would be rhinestones and shit. They had different joints and shit. Philadelphia, whatever the teams were, 76ers, they would have red, white, and blue rhinestones on them, motherfucker. But anyway, when I first seen one of them joints, I was like, damn, them motherfuckers hot. And I immediately knew that I could probably make one. I couldn't afford it. I believe that was probably like a $50 hat back then, back in the 80s and shit. And you had to know who was, customizing and making those joints. Again, this goes back to being in the hood, buying clothes out of the trunks of cars and shit. You got to know these people. But anyway, I went to, I believe, Joanne Fabric and got my own glue. And I had hats for days and shit. I got my own glue and some sequins or rhinestones and shit like that. And start making my own hats and shit. My first couple of joints was a little bit sloppy, the glue wasn't placed right and shit. It's a process. I got better with time, but by the time I started doing this in the summer, by the time school came, fall, I had me like 3 joints that was fire as a motherfucker. When I wore them to school, motherfuckers like, God damn, he got the Oakland A's joint. You know what I'm saying? And I was making them myself and shit, you know what I'm saying? So after that came used jeans. Used jeans and Major Damage was some shit that was very, very fucking expensive. All of the hustlers was wearing them. EPMD was wearing them in videos. Like that was a garment that's gonna ring bells. Used jeans, get used. EPMD was rocking the fuck out of that shit, and I think the Black Beat magazine or something like that. But anyway, used and major damage was the clothing lines that came out that were destroyed, which was essentially destroyed denim. All of the razor cuts on them and the fringes from the blue jean denim ripped up and shit like that. They was the first to start doing that. Get used. I believe the concept was that the garment was used. But anyway, before I, got my chips up and got my first pair of used jeans on my own, I made me a couple pair. I went and got a pair of jeans out of my closet. I got a patch from somewhere or cut a patch off of another jacket or shirt or something like that. And I cut the jeans open and I took the patch and I put it up underneath there. And it showed through just like the major damage and get used line and shit. I took it to my aunt who knew how to sew and shit. And I asked her, I said, Auntie, I got a hole in my jeans and shit. Can you put this patch on there? And she was like, okay. And she grabbed it. I said, no, I want you to put the patch underneath. And she said, why do you want me to put the patch underneath? And right as she asked me that, my cousin walked by hating. That's a style, Ma. That's a style, Ma. He trying to keep up with the styles. That's why he want to do that. He was hating. But after she did it, them joints was lit. And my cousin, of course, he went and cut him up a pair of jeans. And this was life, just trying to have the fly shit, man. Like trying to keep up with what was on Rap City and Yo MTV Raps, man. Like it was a lot of fucking pressure, man. Like going to school and shit like that. Like you needed some things. Same with those Muslim medallions, the African medallions. We was making them joints. I bought them out of stores. My people's, I come from a real culture background. I was always in the bookstores and shit like that. That's where they had them joints at. I got an idea how to make them joints. I was making them joints early. But anyway, getting back to the whole knockoff culture, I believe it is. I know for a period of time, it was outright accepted in the black community. You dig what I'm saying? Because in the 80s, when niggas was going to, different malls and shit like that, or different spots in the hood, they wasn't really in the mall. Niggas was going into spots in the hood that had the heat transfer press. Like you would go in them joints, and they would have heat transfers all over the wall, and you could pick out which one you want. I want that Fila one up there. I want that Adidas one up there. I want that Nike one, and they would pull the motherfucker down, put it on a shirt, and press that shit right in front of you. They just put a fucking Adidas sign on a Fruit of the Loom shirt and sold it to you, and you was good. You was good with it and shit. You was good with that. These types of spots existed for a long time in the streets and shit until I believe corporate America and white folks got hip to what was going on, because this shit was an underground situation. And like I said, I was getting fast money, so I was encountering these older guys who had these garments and shit like that. These are the same niggas who was selling the incense and oils, the niggas that was hustling out the trunks of their cars and shit. And, you would get an idea that after a while, these niggas who selling us these shit, the picture man, and the niggas that selling clothes, a lot of them was ex-hustlers. I mean, they still a hustler. They was ex-crack dealers and shit who probably either got in trouble or probably started getting high and just couldn't deal with it no more, didn't want nothing to deal with it, and they had to go on and find another vice and position in the underworld. So now they the clothes man. He might have, start boosting. A lot of niggas was boosting before the drug game. But these guys that was selling the clothes, they were ex-hustlers. You feel me? So they got expert mouthpieces. They know how to flatter people. You dig what I'm saying? So they running up on us, man. You 14, 15, you got a pocket full of, little fast money. You done gripped up off the block, and they, yo, shorty, check this out. They done pop their trunk, man, and they got that shit. It's right there in front of you and shit, man. And they talking fast and putting it on you and shit, man. You look good in that shit. And these niggas is expert fucking predator salesmen. You know what I'm saying? Spawned in the streets and shit like that. But yeah, man, I for a long time, and I probably almost until I was grown, physically grown, and came home from prison, did I start probably putting emphasis on going to department stores and shit like that, because we shopped around the way and shit, like we shopped in the hood and shit, like there were certain things that they didn't have in the hood, and it would require you to go to the department stores and shit like that. But I got to that level as an adult. Prior to that, all of those designer brands, I encountered them in the streets. Hugo Boss, Tommy Hill, Polo. It's more. Even Guess. They was had that shit was being sold in the streets. That shit was being sold in the streets, man. Like my man told me, he went to the service. He ended up going to the service. He used to hustle and shit like that. He ended up going to the service. He said, man, when I got to the service, man, I didn't know that shit cost so much money. Tommy Hill and Boss and shit like that, man, I didn't know that shit cost all that goddamn money. He said, because we was buying that shit in the hood, in the streets, for $30, for $50 and shit like that. Or, you know what I mean? Or for seriously and shit. Like, it was funny as hell, man. The whole, you wouldn't even make it to a store, man. It was niggas on the block. Jamaica Avenue, 45th and Broadway. I just seen an interview with Luca Brasi on Smoke Champs, and he was talking about how much money he made a day on 45th selling clothes and shit like that. You dig what I'm saying? Somebody was buying that shit. Somebody was buying that shit. But as far as the trunk of the car, I only bought one shearling out of a store. You dig what I'm saying? I bought one shearling out of a store. My Avirexes, I ended up buying maybe one or two out of a store, but I bought them out the trunk of a nigga's car. His name was Ronnie Hammond. And when I bought him out of the store, it was his store. He had graduated. He had hustled us enough to get him a storefront and shit. You know what I'm saying? But it was still the same experiences and shit. This shit wasn't coming off no hanger, no clothes hanger and shit. This nigga was tearing open duffel bags and moving, opening plastic bags up and pulling out a motherfucking leather jacket and shit. Them Avirexes couldn't be knocked off. You couldn't, that leather was unmistakable. It was too heavy and buttery and shit. And we was paying, I think I was paying like $500, $550. Ronnie was giving me plays and shit because I was a frequent flyer. He had been selling me shit since I was like 13. My whole teens, he's the guy. So yeah, I'm buying all my Avirexes, FJ 560s and shit, all came from Ronnie Hammond and shit. He was the one that was going to the Magic Show, meeting Carl Kanai, meeting Shabazz Brothers, meeting these guys physically and coming back with their shit to his store and selling them out his store, the Fat Farm and all that shit. All of these shits that I'm naming was a big deal, man. You couldn't go get, not until later, could you go into a department store and get Fat Farm, I believe. You had to go in the hood to get Fat Farm. You couldn't get that shit nowhere. You had to go and you had to be Jamaica Avenue. You had to be, in different spots to get that shit, man. We used to come to school and kids would be blown the fuck away. I went to Mercier's Prep. We could dress down on Fridays, like every now and then on a Friday for like, I think maybe like $5 or something like that. You could dress down, wear regular clothes. Man, I used to light that motherfucker up, man. And they was just like blown away, like, where's you getting this shit from? Like, I'm wearing the shit that they wearing on TV, the rappers and shit is wearing and shit. But this shit ain't, you not getting this shit in stores and shit. Like, you gotta know who had it and shit. And It was these older guys who was hustling out the trunks of their cars and shit. I didn't. I still buy some shit. You know what I mean? Like I know the difference now. I know the difference now, and I know you know who's boosting and who actually took this shit out of a store. Like I'm not rocking no deliberate I'm not rocking no fake polo. Like the shit you see me wearing is all real, but I'm just saying I will still cop something from a nigga in the streets and shit. I cop on Instagram. Some of them niggas that we used to be hustling out the trunks of their car, they be hustling on Instagram. Mechacopolis, he be selling Avorexes and Sergio Tacchini sweatsuits and shit. There's certain shit that you got to be plugged in to get. But these spots that had this it's not as prevalent anymore. The knockoff thing, them spots is more hidden, but it was really fucking big and shit. When it got out of hand and when it became a bad thing, I believe, is when they got to the sneakers. When they got to the sneaker game, they just went crazy and fucked that all up, and they put a stigma on knockoff, the whole knockoff culture and shit. Because all of a sudden, some of the same niggas that you was buying shit from out of the trunk, now they got these fucking sneakers and shit. You feel me? And you know this shit ain't right. You know this shit ain't right. These niggas got bathing apes and shit like that, selling them out the trunk of their car, man. And you hear rappers talking about these motherfuckers. You know bathing apes is costing like 800, 1,000 and shit like that. You just buy something for 75 or 100 or, you know it ain't right. But once you start seeing niggas, they coming through with Air Force Ones with Louis Vuitton logos and bandanas, they just went crazy and fucked the whole out of the trunk shit up. So yeah, now if it ain't legit, no one's probably gonna buy it unless you down south in Atlanta. I stumbled upon some shit in Atlanta, man, like last summer. No, it was last winter. Into the spring. Maybe like March, April, something like that. It was still a little cold. I was looking for a specific hat, and somebody directed me someplace. I ain't gonna blow up the spot. And the place that I needed to go was in um like a shopping. Let's say they had tore a old grocery store apart, and inside the grocery store it's a whole bunch of different like merchants and shit. They got these in different stores. But anyway, I was directed to a certain boutique within this enclosure, within this property. And I was it was some Muslim guys that I was looking for. I was trying to get some knitted hats. Shout out to the PA Knit, actually. I was actually looking for a knitted cap. And as I'm walking through this spot, I'm looking at shit as I'm passing by different stands and shit. I'm like, oh my God. Oh my God, I didn't even know this shit still existed. I didn't. And it's advanced. You dig what I'm saying? And the shit that I seen was unfucking believable. You hear me? Unbelievable. I'm like, number one, anybody wearing designer clothes in Atlanta, it's suspect. It's suspect. If you don't see them come out the store with it, it's suspect. This shit was good knockoff, good quality, good Fendi, good Gucci, good look. I'm like, wowzers. I'm like, I couldn't believe this shit. I'm like, oh my God, man. I'm looking at this shit, man. I know this shit costs money. It's that monkey shit. It's that flim flam. It's the slum game and shit. It's always been around. My father was a hustler. He hustled out. He's one of the guys that, hustled in the street, hustled out the trunk and shit. And they was slumming purses back in the day. That's the older niggas used to be selling. Come through your house and shit, sell your mom, your auntie a purse and shit, leather purses. He got a trash bag full of purses, all different colors and shit like that, all different styles. Come through and sell. They used to call it slumming, selling slum and shit. You go to the city, get you a bag of slum, come back and pump it and shit, pumping in, your area and shit. Um, when I got out of the penitentiary, the uh the whole knockoff game had expanded. It had went digital. They took that shit far. They took it far. When I got out in 2004, one of my first hustles, I had a book deal. I was doing literary shit. I was developing Gully TV. One of my first extreme hustles though was pumping CDs, DVDs, mixtapes, and shit like that out the trunk of my Acura, out the trunk of a car. You could go, if you knew the right people, you could get shipped to you, or you can go pick them up if you was in certain cities. A shrink wrapped box, a pre-wrapped shrink wrapped box, taped up box that is a goodie bag. You open this motherfucker up, you might have 100 DVDs in there, in cases, shrink wrapped. You might have 100 mixtapes. You're gonna have all the Tyler Perrys in this motherfucker, all this shit in one for like $150. You might have paid $150 or $100 for these cases and shit. I was blowing through them joints. That was part of the the magnetism that drew Gully TV and me as a person closer to hip hop media and shit. Having all of them fucking mixtapes and DVDs and shit like that. Like, I was in the process of developing my own, but I was the knockoff nigga. I had everybody's shit. So I'm watching Smack all fucking day. I'm watching Cocaine City to come up, Cheddar, whoever was out in the streets. Night Sessions. Y'all remember Night Sessions? Night Sessions was one of the early ones. One of the first DVDs. But I was pumping them joints and shit. You know what I'm saying? And that shit was big, man. That was big. That was big business, man. Niggas made lots of money. I was in Atlanta and Erie and Columbus, Ohio, pumping them joints. You know what I'm saying? Like, you could go to barbershops. You can go to a barbershop and empty the whole box. You know what I'm saying? You could serve the whole barbershop and then turn around and serve the nigga who owned the barbershop. You feel me? So he can make some money. And you still got a box and shit. All right, I'm out. Go put in the order. You got all of the mixtapes. Niggas benefited from this industry too. Trust me. 50 Cent, Lloyd Banks, all of them, the G Unit, and the Dipset. They benefited exponentially from it as far as a marketing vehicle. You feel me? They would go, my man Uncasa told me, he said, man, they would go, make music and shit and come up to 45th and get a shit to them, to the Taliban and shit, and let them niggas pump that shit in the streets and shit. You feel me? And this is generating money, but it's also generating, it's a fucking marketing campaign. Everybody, these shits is making it to these barbershops. They making it to these flea markets. They making it to these mom and pop stores. And before you know it, a kid in, Wyoming, a kid in Utah, a kid in Nebraska, a kid in Massachusetts, a kid in Alabama, then got his hands on a fucking K Slay mixtape. You feel me? He done got his hand on a Taliban TV DVD or some shit like that. Because of this underground digital economy, it was the knockoff game. By the time it turned digital, they started calling it counterfeiting. The term has started to change. They called it the counterfeit game and shit. But it was so much money, man. It was so much money, man. You buying a DVD from a nigga from the suppliers for $1 or 50 cents. 50 cents, 2 quarters. And you selling them to motherfuckers for $10, $20. Niggas was giving up 20, depending on how hot the DVD was. And nigga give you $25, $30, $50. Man, let me get, that's the last one. Oh man, I need that, man. Give you $50 fucking for the joint. Tell them you ain't got no more, man. That's the last one and shit. You dig what I'm saying? Some shit going on in the streets, G-Unit beefing and shit like that. Niggas want to see. You couldn't get that shit nowhere else but the streets, but the hood, but out the trunks of niggas' cars. People that know 50 Cent now, They don't know that nigga was pulling out hammers and shit on DVDs. You had to be a part of that underground world to see them DVDs. They don't know that nigga was brandishing pistols and shit like that. They know him as a businessman now. They don't remember Bangum Smurf and all of them niggas wilding, pulling out AKs and shit like that. They don't remember that shit. You dig what I'm saying? But to get that, again, you had to go into the hood. Some clown hopped up under my post and said some shit like, nah, I wasn't wearing no knockoff in the 90s, and started talking all this high-end stores that he was shopping at. Nigga, they wasn't selling no fucking colorful Avirexes and no goddamn Kaufmans. They wasn't selling them in no fucking Macy's and shit like that. You dig what I'm saying? And Avirex has been around forever. They did, in some of those department stores, they had Avirex leathers in there. They didn't look like the ones we were wearing, though. They looked like a fucking aviation jacket. That's where they started out as, a fucking pilot's jacket and shit. You dig what I'm saying? But yeah, I had to put this nigga in, clown ass nigga. You thought you was gonna come here and try to clown the underground economy? The fucking flavor starts in the streets. It starts out the trunks of cars. Starts at barbershops, in the fucking streets. If it don't catch fire in the streets, it ain't gonna work in mainstream America and shit. Nigga tried to speak down on the niggas hustling and using getting by on ingenuity and shit like that. Yeah, I used to buy some of that shit. I got old pictures in the real in 1993 in the real Carl Kanai shit out the store. I bought it out the fucking store. You dig what I'm saying? I don't think they got started to knock that shit off to like the next summer. Like the next summer, you probably started to see Carl Kanai short sets and shit. Y'all remember them joints with the stripes and shit like that? With the hood, the girls was wearing and shit. That shit, there was a progression and shit like that. But again, it starts in the motherfucking streets, man. I gotta get some fucking music for. I spoke to this girl. Shout out to Chrissy Mack. I spoke to one of my associates, and she was explaining to me the licensing for music is available. I want to come on this motherfucker sometimes, listen to some hot shit. Like today, I'm kicking this retro shit. I needed to come onto this motherfucker to the Booming System by LL Cool J. You know what's funky, because you heard it from hearsay. A jam that you love that don't be getting no airplay. Strictly for fun. You heard it from hearsay. You hear LL? Did y'all hear what he said? You know what's funky, because you heard it from hearsay. You heard it from hearsay. A jam that you love that don't be getting no airplay. It's not played on the radio. You gotta come to the hood. You gotta come to the streets with that ear and get that flavor. You dig what I'm saying? And this is my first pair of Pradas was knockoffs. I know they were knockoffs. I didn't care. The day that I wanted them so bad, I was in Chicago. I went there with Prada money. I went there with $1,500, $2,000 in my pocket. I went to buy some motherfucking Pradas. You feel me? When we got to, I think, Madison and Pulaski and, Tops and Bottoms and all these different spots and shit, I'm asking niggas, man, where the Pradas at and shit? They like, man, they down there and shit. You dig what I'm saying? Hit me with a head nod. Just go down there, ask them niggas down there and shit. So I walked down there. And niggas are stepping to me and shit. You know what I mean? This is one of them active avenues and shit. It's one of the ones that's still a little active. I don't know how the violence has affected in the economy. Shout out to the hustlers that work that block. But they stepping, they stepping me. Everybody's selling something. You know what I mean? And every time I want the Pradas, you want the Pradas? They down there and shit. Everybody keep hitting me with the day down there. So finally somebody said, go over there. Hit me with a head nod. Go over there. I went in a door. I went down a hall. I went down some steps. I went down another door. Down another hallway. Turned the corner. Got on an elevator. And I came out and I was in a store. There was people in there shopping and shit already. You dig what I'm saying? It was people shopping. This shit was amazing. You dig what I'm saying? This is many years ago and shit. The fucking so yeah, where the Pradas at, man? They showed them to me and shit, man. They was in boxes and shit like that. And I bought them motherfuckers, man. They felt good on my feet. I wouldn't know what the real Pradas felt like because I hadn't ever had any. But after I bought them motherfuckers in Chicago, the next time I was in a motherfucking designer store, I went and bought me some motherfucking products. But I know my first pair of products is probably like maybe like 2008, something like that. 2008, something like, yeah. I know they wasn't right. I didn't care. I was fresh as a motherfucker in them joints, yo. uh, Shout out to Woodbury Commons, man. I bought 2, 3 flavors from up there. Those were my first authentic Prada sneakers and shit. Today, I'm not even wrapped up into the fads, the designer shit. How I dress is how I dress. I primarily be having on athletic wear, gym shit. But that knockoff game, I won't say knockoff game. That out of the trunk hustle, I'm gonna separate the two. Knockoff and out of the trunk hustle, because out of the trunk hustle, you might have got some boosted shit and you might have got some authentic shit. But getting back to it, to the out of the trunk hustle and shit. Some of my first encounters, I didn't even know how to pronounce Versace. I believe everybody black thought that shit said Versace. You dig what I'm saying? I believe that when Biggie was rapping about that shit, we wasn't there yet. You had to get your chips up to get a Versace shirt, and to get a real Coogee and all of that and shit. I ended up getting it on in the streets and getting everything that came with that. But I just know that that out of the trunk hustle, Red Monkey jeans, Avizu jeans, and True Religion, there was an industry. Y'all know it and I know it. The True Religion knockoff business was huge too. Nobody was asking. When niggas was selling them joints, oh, these are $150. Niggas was buying them. Straight like that. You know what I mean? Knowing that the actual pair cost a lot more than that and shit. You know what I mean? How much is it? Man, you get, if you buy 2, I'll give them to you for this and shit. Like niggas was in them joints, man. Them double stitch joints and shit. I never bought I think I bought 1 pair out of a store. I can't even remember what they cost. I was buying them like I be amongst hustlers. I be amongst niggas who be in the streets. Me and Uncas and them to be together. Skibo, Debo, them to be together. Different people was coming through with clothes and shit. Whether they was boosted or whatever, man. Like, I got these and shit, man. Let me see them. You know what I mean? Not only am I gonna cop, man, I might want several dozen and shit. I might want to get some of the money too and shit if it's like that. But yeah. Red Monkey jeans and a Avizu. When Jay-Z started rapping about that type of shit, number one, niggas didn't even know where to buy that shit at. That shit was in very, very high-end boutique style stores and shit. All of a sudden, they became available in the hood. You start seeing motherfuckers with Avizus on, Avizu jeans, shorts, and it just materialized. And nobody was really questioning the authenticity of they had went as far as putting tags on. You couldn't tell the difference. The counterfeit game had became so incredible that they had got to packaging. Now they packaging it like the shit. It has tags on it. Everything, the boxes, like it started to progress to something very, very serious and shit. You will hear people say this, that they've bought better knockoffs than the actual garment. Let me tell you why I believe this to be truth in some instances. I've bought a couple of designer belts out of stores, handful of them, right? The most expensive one that I bought, I believe, was probably $650. Might have cost $650. I think the first one I ever bought was a Louis Vuitton one, and it cost $650. Shit, right? This shit started to fall apart within. This shit started to fall apart, man. Like within probably like 5, 6 months. The belt was trash. Like I paid $650 with this motherfucker. This motherfucker come with all types of thank you cards and shit. They make you feel real special as they trimming you out your money and shit. Thank you cards and your name on the receipt and a box and, you know, sucker. This is how they do this how they doing us and shit. That shit started falling apart. Somewhere within there. Now I got, like I said, I got a handful of designer belts that I bought out the store, real ones. Somewhere within my travels, I was somewhere. One of my homies might have had some belts. He might have was selling belts or had some belts and shit. How much you want for them? I got this one, this and this. I just want $150 and shit. I bought the belt. It was a Louis Vuitton joint, brown joint. Somebody ended up stealing it. I had it for a while though. That Louis Vuitton belt ended up being the most durable. That knockoff belt ended up being the most durable belt. I was wearing it more than I was wearing my real ones. You dig what I'm saying? Because it was going to actually hold my fucking pants up and shit. It was going to actually stay in the fucking loop and hold my pants up. You dig what I'm saying? Like, one thing about the designer belts and shit, like when you get one out the store, they come in sizes and shit. You feel me? They're going to go get you a belt that fits you. You're not going to have all that excess belt hanging off you and shit like that. So, you know, the belt that you get out the store is probably almost customized for your waistline and shit because they got sizes and shit. The knockoff game, I don't believe they got sizes. They didn't master like a one-size-fits-all situation. And it just was working the fuck out. I ain't tripping off that shit no more. I'm past that part of my life. I just remember when during my teenage years, like I said, I was talking about this picture when out of the trunk economy, the out of the trunk hustle was a big thing in my life for years until I was basically grown. I remember the first time that we seen the Also Simple video. It might have been Cream. No, I think it was Cream. First time we started to see Wu-Tang on TV, you immediately knew they was buying clothes out of the trunks, just like us, because we was wearing the same shit. You can go look at Wu-Tang's old videos, and they got these hats. It's similar to the joint I'm wearing right now. And it had pinstripes, like it was like plaid and shit. It was like plaid. Everybody had, we all had them hats. We all had them. And it was like whenever the hats came to the avenue or came to the trunks of niggas' cars, they sold them shits. You know, the flavors, the styles and shit coming out of New York City, it just spread and shit. But when we seen that videos, they was dressed just like us before they got some money. Go back and look at Cash Rules Everything Around Me video. And Also Simple. This is before they got some money and shit. You know what I mean? Everybody's teeth wasn't fixed yet. Niggas, everybody to have a nice haircut, looking all pretty and glowing and shit. Niggas was out of them fucking projects, Stapleton and shit like that. You know what I mean? Shout out to everybody out there. Shout out to Wu-Tang. Very, very influential on the fashion. But yeah, them early videos and shit, especially in the wintertime. The shit the niggas is wearing in the wintertime, and that picture of me with that Timberland shit on, it was in the wintertime. That's what we was wearing. Bubble gooses, vests, Timbs, big black collar sweatshirt under the fucking vest and shit. You know what I'm saying? Everything that you seen in the early Wu-Tang videos, the East Coast was dressed just like that because we was under the same climate and shit like that. Same with Mobb Deep. Go look at their early videos and shit when they out there on the corners and they out there in the projects. The shit that they was wearing, Helly Hansen and all of that shit. Guess, we was all wearing that shit. Guess is another thing that was knocked off. And I don't believe Guess ever came out with, Guess, the actual designer, ever came out with a fucking short set with the logo on the chest and the logo on the shorts. Y'all know the shit the niggas was buying out of the trunks of cars and barbershops and shit like that. Everybody didn't have one. Niggas' kids had them. They had them for kids and shit. What this little nigga doing wearing Tommy Hill? You know Tommy Hill ain't made that little ass shirt. But this is the underground economy, and this is something that was accessible to hustlers and nobody else and shit. This was my world was like in my teens. I just killed this shit, man. See, when it's from the heart and it's authentic, it just flows and shit. That shit that I just dropped in here, it can never be duplicated. You have to have lived through that whole experience and shit. Shout out to the flea markets, the swap meets, you dig? Everybody, all the mom and pop spots that were selling, the little record stores that were selling clothes out of them and shit like that. You go get your t-shirt, a sweatshirt, a hat. Everybody that was a part of that life and shit, I was a part of it too. Make sure y'all subscribe to my channel on YouTube. I'm killing this shit. My podcast is electrifying. It's fluid. It's original. And you can't get this shit nowhere else. This shit is esoteric. I got Nick up in this motherfucker with me. We killing this shit. Make sure on all platforms you following me. Gully TV, the Dribble Podcast. Shout out to all of my sponsors. Shout out to the PA Knit. Make sure y'all get y'all one, man. It's the fastest growing fashion brand on the East Coast. PA Knit. I'm out of here. Peace. Killed that shit.